Welcome back to our learning session, how to produce a great webinar with Wirecast. I am pleased to show you this because we use Wirecast every week almost, or at least every month, to create our own webinars. Sometimes we do 3, 4, 5 webinars every month, and we could not do it without using our own product. It has become one of our most valuable tools in webinars, and we actually plan on doing a webinar all about webinars as well, so we will show that as well. But for today, quickly, I want to show you how you can use this sort of video mixing and video broadcasting tool to produce better webinars. And it's pretty simple, and I don't think this will take too long. Let me show you real fast. So the first thing you want to do is open Wirecast. Why is Wirecast useful for webinars? Well, you can download it for free and try it. And you'll see what I mean, but this is really was designed to produce video and video broadcasts for the internet. Eventually, we found that it was not just useful for that, it was useful for sending broadcasts to our webinar platform. Some webinar platforms, not all, will accept a live RTMP stream, and Wirecast does RTMP streams. Why does that matter? It matters because Wirecast can stream at 30 frames per second, and it can stream almost anything you put into it. Multiple cameras, your screen or desktop. It can bring in titles or graphics. It can do chroma key and replace your background. You can play pre-recorded videos. You can bring in remote cameras and all kinds of different things. So it is a very, very versatile video or media production tool, a switcher or a video mixer, as they're sometimes called. And when you pipe that into your webinar platform, you really find that you really up the quality of your webinar experience for your viewers and the people who attend your webinars. So it's a really, really neat way to do whatever you need to do, whether that is just bring in slides, whether it's bring in slides plus your audio, or bring in slides plus video, or slides plus a screen capture. We noticed that one of the things that's very important to us is we demo video products. Video products are, by definition, they have video in them. And video doesn't look good unless it's, if it's at small scale, or let me bring this up to fit. So this resolution's really, let me up the resolution here. One of the things is video doesn't look good unless it's in smooth frame rates, right? So it's very important that when we're showing what our product can do, that the actual showing of that, or the person who's watching us show that, or watching that demonstration through a webinar, sees a smooth streamed experience that's around 30 frames per second, because that's the point at which our software looks like it's working the way it's supposed to work, because it is supposed to work with video. So it was very important, and because of that, we naturally were like, well, we should use a software that can stream at 30 frames per second to stream all of our webinars. And from there, it became really simple to start adding all of our content in there. And pretty soon we were running our slides and our desktop and our screen capture and our video and our audio all into Wirecast, and then piping that into the webinar platform. We then just use the webinar platform for things like little slides, little polls. You know, we would throw up a few reminder slides, but most of the content would actually be in the video frame coming from Wirecast. And then we would just use the actual slides on the webinar platform for little additional information, sort of audience polling and interaction and reminders. We'd also use it for the chat feature, because a lot of people want to ask questions or have questions during a webinar. So the webinar platform then we kind of split the duties. The webinar platform would handle all the registration, the linking, the hosting, and Wirecast would handle all the content production for the most part. So once we realized that using Wirecast in conjunction with your webinar platform was really the best way to do it, we've only been doing it that way ever since. So that's one of the reasons. So using Wirecast, I've added a camera here. And I'm actually going to take myself out of the screen because I'm already in the screen. So let's just show my screen here. And then I'm going to add a slide content here. So very easy to do with Wirecast, but let's open that slide deck that I just had open. This is the tips on how to create great webinars. So this is just a slide presentation. And all I want to do is bring this slide into Wirecast. And I've shown this before, but we're going to add basically a screen capture. And Wirecast does great screen capture. We can then go to our video. We can choose whether we want to do a monitor or a window. I'm going to choose window at the moment. I'm going to select an application, which in this case is Keynote. Hit OK. And there it is. I've now got my screen capture of just the Keynote window, and it's live. You can actually see the mouse hovering around. And maybe you don't want to show your cursor. There's lots of little features that help with that. You may also want to capture your system audio. That may or may not be necessary if you've got audio playing in your slides or in your presentation. In my case, I don't. It's just old slides. So now I've got these two shots in Wirecast, both my camera and my slide content. All right. And I'm going to even move this over to a different sort of screen so you can see. And then if I switch through the slides, you can see I'm now live switching, and Wirecast sees every change, right? And in my case, I may even want to zoom in the sort of the screen here. Let's see if I can zoom it in. Looks like not. Maybe I can make this larger. Okay, so then if I hit play, I can take it full screen. In my case, I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to maybe cut down on the slides. But you could make this full screen. You could go in and crop it. For example, we can crop the top. Boom, and I'm just going to do a rough job here, but crop this in, crop that, left and right. And there you go. There's your slide, and I can even stretch or scale to fit, right? So there's my how to create great webinars, and if I change the slide, it changes in Wirecast. So now I can talk about my slides, and then I can cut back to my camera, and then I can cut back to my slides. So I'm controlling the viewing experience for the webinar attendee. And I can add, of course, a bunch of other things as well. And I can even create a third shot where, say, I want to duplicate this one. So let's duplicate the shot. That'll create a copy of this screenshot. And in this duplicate, I just want to add my camera on top of that. And in this case, I can chroma key out the background, similar to what we're doing here. Now I'm actually in the shot with my slide content. So I now have 3 camera shots, all live, all for the purpose of producing my webinar. So you see, just from those 2 sources, I've created 3 different shots, all of which enhance my viewers' experience of the webinar and the material. And that's because I have these tools available to me in a live mixing software like Wirecast. The final step is to stream it to your webinar platform. Now, under the output settings in Wirecast, you won't find webinar platforms on this list. There's just really not that many. They're all mostly streaming destinations, right? But webinars that webinar platforms that accept an RTMP stream may be running on someone like Akamai, or maybe running on someone like Verizon, or many others, or say Wowza, of course, and they might be running that under the hood. So there's a lot of these webinar platforms. One way or another, they need to be running some sort of streaming server in the background, and then they restream or serve that video up to the webinar attendees in a live player on the platform. So it's really no different than streaming to something like YouTube or Facebook Live in that sense. The only difference is all around that, the webinar platform has built additional tools to enhance the experience. So you get these other tools that webinar platforms offer. And then the video piece of it looks very much like the video you'd watch on any site. And in this case, you generally want to stream to an RTMP server because the webinar platform you work with will just give you an address. Just stream it to, on24.com/ and they'll give you an ingestion sort of address. And then that's all you need to plug in here. As long as they accept RTMP, you point Wirecast where to send your stream. And in my case, again, you might send ours as on24, and I don't have a real address here, but / my webinar, whatever it is that they tell you. There's usually a long sort of key that has numbers and letters, and and they'll usually sort of give you the stream name. And then when that is all entered correctly, and you've also checked with them what size do they accept, how big is the size that you can stream to. You hit OK, and then you can start streaming your webinar content to your platform, and it gets tunneled in for your audience. Now, there will be some latency with that because by the time your audience watches it on the webinar platform, it may be 10, 20, 30, even 40 or 50 seconds if they're using a newer technology like HLS and they're trying to make it totally adaptive for multiple screens. But it's really, really worth doing because you get this rich experience and the versatility of what you can show is much higher. So that's basically it. There's one other sort of tip here for webinars and for people using Wirecast for webinars. If your webinar platform does not accept RTMP streaming, but it does accept a webcam, you can use Wirecast's built-in tool called the virtual camera. The virtual camera basically tricks other software into thinking that it is a real webcam that you've plugged in, when in fact it is just Wirecast's program mix, whether it's the green screen or the camera, whatever you have in Wirecast is now being output to other software programs at the size that you select here. In general, I recommend the 720 size because most webcam software does not like to work at the 1080 level. So 720 is usually more than enough. And when you virtual camera out. 720 is usually more than enough. You can also enable the virtual microphone. This can get a little trickier because that's basically the Wirecast audio that comes with the video, but more often than not, you may just want your audio coming directly into your webinar software with an attached microphone and forget about having to run all that audio through Wirecast. You can certainly do it. It just is a little more complex and it doesn't always work with every webinar platform. And so if you don't need it, you don't need it. Hit start. That will start your virtual camera. And then you can open additional software, like your webinar software, and choose the Wirecast virtual camera as your source. So on this sort of camera, on this one, I might choose something like my Skype, if you were using, or join.me is another one. We can open that for a second. And I believe join.me has a webcam. Let's just check this. All right, cool. Let's go back here. And it looks like it installed a new version, but there it is. It's going now. Okay, so join.me, if I go to, I think maybe I'm wrong on this, but if you hit start, it might just be screen sharing. Okay, so that might be a bad example in this case. So why don't I use Skype? That's a safer example for the moment, and I'll show you how the virtual camera kind of works on the other end. But that's okay. So go to Skype, and then if you go to the preferences in Skype, you will find the audio and video settings. And right there, you'll see the live broadcast area, and Wirecast Virtual Camera is selectable as a camera source. And this is the camera, sort of the webcam that you're plugging in to the program. So if you're using Skype, or if you're using programs like GoToWebinar and so forth, that is a great tip here. And then if we take, the reason you're seeing this gray broadcast area is because this is just what's in my live output area. But Wirecast, of course, whatever's live in this little window, and I can just choose the red button up here to just show the live area, that should show up in Skype. And if I change it in Wirecast to this, then you'll see in Skype it's that. So that's my Wirecast virtual camera going into Skype. Now, this is backwards to me, but it's not backwards to the person watching on Skype. So the reason that is because if I raise my hand on, over here, it's going to look like it's the correct hand. So it's just for Skype to help keep track of which left is left and right is right. You can see that in the actual video itself, it's mirrored the other way because So it makes sense. So now it's much easier for me to watch myself in Skype. But for your purposes, that's not going to matter too much because you're probably mostly going to be watching your Wirecast output. And as long as people can read the text, and they will on the other end. All right, so that is basically it. That's how you make great webinars using Wirecast. It's using the the tools that are available as well as the virtual camera if you need it. But more often than not, if you can, you want to stream RTMP to your webinar platform. And thanks for watching the learning session. And we'll see you on the next learning session. For those of you who want to stick around, I can take some questions now. All right, guys, I'm going to pull up these. You lost some frames. All right, guys, if you don't have any questions, that's totally fine. I'm going to actually reset this real fast. Make sure I got all the questions and comments. Deb, you're wondering what is the difference between Ustream and On24? The difference between Ustream and On24 is Ustream started out as a live video broadcasting site and added webinar style features later. And On24 started out as strictly as an online webinar platform and has begun adding live streaming features. So they kind of came at it from different directions, but they're really ending up in similar places. I would think that On24 has slightly more mature webinar-related features, but I couldn't tell you 100% since I haven't used Ustream all that often. Mostly they will do the live video tunnel experience, but a lot of their extra stuff around that is not, in my experience, hasn't been as fleshed out. They usually have like a chat window and things like that, whereas On24 has a much more of a kind of controlled experience, and they, in theory, some webinar platforms even allow for two-way communication and channels. Of course, Ustream wouldn't do that unless it was through chat. But other webinar platforms can allow multiple people to call in and even talk or conference in with you. So you would want to check, again, do your own testing, check them out to make sure that you get the webinar platform that's going to be right for you. But both of those are great options if they're in your budget. No problem. Thanks for asking. Okay, and then CHS Education, you're welcome. Thanks for tuning in from Australia. And I could try my Australian accent. I'd probably just end up offending you, though. What kind of camera am I using right now? Right now we're using the Blackmagic Ursa Mini camera from Blackmagic, and it's a great little camera. We like it a lot. Luke, you're wondering, any thoughts on why Facebook playback seems to have video audio out of sync? Streams play fine on YouTube. It's a good question. Facebook, in my experience, is a more resource-intensive site. I find that my computer tends to slow down quite a bit when it comes to using and streaming Facebook, and you might be experiencing something along that line where it's just you get a loading issue, or there's some sort of something going on behind the scenes where you can't those can't get served up in the same. It could be something on Facebook servers. It could even be something on the encoding side with Wirecast, although if it's streaming okay on YouTube and it looks okay, then it shouldn't be a problem, and they should be within very close. Are you noticing a huge drift? Are you noticing a small drift? One thing we would need to do is check the recorded version after the fact and compare them, the YouTube versus the Wirecast. If we notice a big difference on the two, then it's probably happening somewhere further up the chain. The microphone I'm using is a Countryman and Associates ISOMAX microphone. Countryman and Associates. I'll type that in. They make great microphones, so you'll want to if you they're usually around $500-600, but they're really really good microphones, and I think they're great for presentation stuff. Works fine in real time. YouTube playback is fine, but playback in Facebook is out of sync. It's a great. I couldn't tell you if we find that is a consistent thing, and is it on your own broadcasts, please report that to us and give examples. Links are always helpful so we can compare. And then if we can reproduce it every time on our own end, that's also really helpful because then we know it's a consistent issue. Whether it's on the Facebook side or whether it's on our side was something we'd need to figure out. All right. I think that's it, you guys. Thanks for asking questions. Thanks for sticking around for the learning session. I hope this was helpful on how you can use Wirecast to produce great webinars. We think it is a really powerful webinar tool, any basically media mixing tool that you need to do, whether it's for a webinar or whether it's for a live broadcast like this one. And leave your comments and questions in the feed, and we'll try to get back to them if there's anything else that this brought up for you. Really appreciate you watching, and stay tuned next week. We'll be doing another learning session, this time with do-it-yourself streaming and getting started with Wowza. So Wowza is a really, really powerful hosting tool and sort of stream management and coding tool, and it kind of lets you be your own mini Facebook or YouTube and allow people to kind of log in and watch those streams, and you can host them on your own personal sites and not have to worry about what's going on behind the scenes. If you have an audio video sync problem or something like that, you can usually figure it out really quickly because everything's really under your control. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys. I see one last question from CHS Education. For the new MacBook Pro, there's a cable to connect the Blackmagic. Is there a cable to connect the Blackmagic Ultra Studio Thunderbolt 2 to USB-C? Yeah, there are. There's adapters. And if it is a Blackmagic Ultra Studio Thunderbolt 2, then you're just going to get a Thunderbolt 2 to 3 converter. The USB-C is now also the same as Thunderbolt in terms of the connector type. Those ports on the Mac are bi-compatible. They're basically USB-C ports and Thunderbolt 3 ports. So you're going to want to get that Thunderbolt 3 converter to Thunderbolt 2. And it will fit nicely right into your new MacBook Pro and should convert it without a problem. You can buy those online. I think Apple sells them. Some people have mixed reviews on the Apple converters. I don't know if there's better ones than those right now, but that's where you'd find it. And most of the Thunderbolt 2 people that I know that have the new MacBooks are using adapters like that with their older Thunderbolt devices, and they don't seem to have any problems. All right, you guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.